Have you ever considered how you might reach out to someone in your life to ask for a favor? You would probably ask a parent or your favorite uncle for a favor little differently than you would ask your best friend. I mean, your relationships with people and how others understand who you are will impact how your request will be heard. Each person in our life knows us in slightly different ways. We don't always show all parts of ourselves to everyone. I mean, for example, you might have an extraordinary teacher sitting in front of the classroom who you have no idea is an amazing magician, talented musician, or an influential activist. We see in others what they want us to see and what society has taught us and socialized to see. Once we have reflected on our individual and group identities and the most important roles they play in our life, we will then move into how we present ourselves through verbal and nonverbal communication, with the knowledge that how others see us will also play a role in our performance, both on stage and off. For example, if you, Jennifer Lopez, and Lady Gaga happen to walk into a grocery store at the same time, would you all be seen and treated the same way? No, you wouldn't. People would scrutinize purchases and analyze attire and grooming much more closely if you are world famous. Said differently, who we look like to the world and what others think we represent will create initial and potentially prejudicial assumptions of what we should sound like as speakers and what our message ought to be. We ask you to think critically about who you are, how you identify, and how these identifications might influence your presentation of self and your messaging. Our goal is to help you figure out the best ways to present yourself for your personal and professional goals. Now, let's move on to socializing selves. We are taught to understand our identities and the identities of others through a variety of socializing agents, including our families, schools, neighborhoods, media, and places of worship. Each socializing agent in our life plays a role in teaching us about relationships with others and how our identities are viewed and valued in society. For example, if you are a Latinx person who grew up in a mostly Italian American neighborhood in New York City, your understanding about what it means to be an immigrant family would be influenced by the people and places around you, and how similar or dissimilar their family immigration story is from yours. If, however, you are a Latinx person raised in East Los Angeles, where the cultural makeup of the neighborhood is predominantly members from Latinx communities with many newly immigrated individuals, this could create potentially different understandings of what it means to be from an immigrant family. The socializing agents situated in New York versus East LA would each teach you different things about your identities. Socializing agents help us to figure out what our identities mean and how we ought to perform based on our race, culture, religion, gender, and social class. Different parts of the country will provide different messages about communication, communicative norms, and values. How you greet a stranger on the streets will be largely influenced by where you are raised and how greetings and strangers were seen and valued in your community. In some major cities around the United States, it would be considered strange or inappropriate to wave or make eye contact with a stranger passing by you on the street or sitting across from you on the subway. In other places, especially in smaller communities, it would be considered rude not to wave or greet a person passing you by. How we understand communication and the community's communicative norms are largely based on the socializing agents in our early life. These socializing agents teach us how we ought to be in a specific setting. Now, One thing we want to stress here is that just because socializing agents demonstrate or push a specific role or communicative behavior does in no way mean that you have to accept this as a way of being. Each of us has agency to question, challenge, accept, or reject normative communication expectations and social roles. You get to choose how you want to present yourself. One of the most common social roles forwarded in many families is that young girls and women should help with housework. This is a gendered family practice and one that causes countless arguments in households. You always have the agency or choice to ignore these gendered roles and go out with your friends instead of helping around the house. While agency provides options for choosing to reject a social norm, it does not eliminate consequences to relationships. In addition to gendered communicative norms that are taught to us through socialization and socializing agents for how to behave, interact, and communicate, there are also normative communication expectations based on your cultural identity, race, the religion where you were raised, and social economic status. The term intersectionality was coined by civil rights activist and lawyer Kimberly Crenshaw to address the experience of having multiple, competing, overlapping, and simultaneous identities that each of us in our lives experience. These intersectional identities, or how our individual identities combine to inform our experiences, such as being a US-born white woman or an immigrant Vietnamese man, are never experienced as singular identities. Said differently, as an individual, we can never experience just one identity at a time. For example, you can never just be your race or gender. You'll always experience your race through your gender and vice versa. Each of our identities is like a lens that will provide us with a view and experience of our surroundings. And each identity/lens will also inform the ways we understand and experience our other diverse identities. Aside from our families, friends, school, places of worship, and community centers, another socializing agent that is increasingly ubiquitous is media. Through communication theory, we know that images that have presented and reproduced through media give us a lens for how we understand groups who we do not often interact with in our daily lives. For example, if you do not see or personally know a lot of Latinas, you may automatically think of the jobs that Latinas most often occupy in movies and on television. The roles Latinas are most often cast for are hypersexualized and represent limited employment opportunities beyond that of a nanny or maid. If you do not know many Latinas, you may assume that all Latinas are both super sexy and great cleaners, thus placing limits and assumptions on people from this group. Limited representation in media leads to limited images and understanding of a group. These limited understandings, assumptions, and stereotypes then make their way into everyday interactions and reactions to people and policies. As individuals, we have to constantly check our perceptions. Everyone makes assumptions, but the difference between critical thinkers and lazy thinkers is the ability to stop, question, think about why you believe these assumptions or stereotypes, and to change our thinking if necessary.